Good morning, everyone. This is the Korean Vegan, and I'm so excited to be taking over the Feedfeed Snapchat. So this is where you can find me. This is my website, thekoreanvegan.com. Here you'll be able to find all my recipes as well as my other social media. And of course, you can also find me on Instagram at the.korean.vegan. And you can also find me on Facebook at The Korean Vegan. And this is today's event. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. That includes men and women who are also de facto dads sometimes. My dad happens to be in Korea, unfortunately, but in his honor, I am making these Korean-style churros because he is a donut fiend. So these are very simple to make. We are only talking about 7 ingredients, all of which are displayed here. So we've got 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast, 1 cup of dairy-free milk. We've also got 3 tablespoons of whipped up chickpea brine or aquafaba, some cinnamon, some more sugar, and of course it's really hard to make donuts without dough. So we have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Sorry guys, I made my first mistake. There's actually also 2 tablespoons of vegan butter. I'm using Miyoko's. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually melt the butter in a little saucepan. Next, I'm going to add the non-dairy milk. I'm using 1 cup of almond milk here. And finally, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. And that'll dissolve nicely. I'm going to use just a wooden spoon to stir that all together as it heats up and gets warm. So as I've been baking a lot more bread, I've become more acquainted with the science of yeast. There's like nothing more demoralizing than seeing your bread not rise. So when I started experiencing that situation, I was like, is it the yeast? Is it me? Is it my house? What the heck? So now that the butter has melted, we're going to remove it from the heat because one of the things I learned is that yeast doesn't like too hot. Another thing I learned about yeast is that there's this stuff called instant yeast and active dry. Active dry is what people usually get. I prefer instant yeast because you're going to see the results much quicker and it's more foolproof in my opinion. You don't have to, quote, proof the yeast in advance to make sure that yeast is still alive. And yes, yeast can die. In fact, I learned just recently that yeast really only has a shelf life of about 2 months, even this. Unfortunately, there's no like mold or smell that tells you that it's dead. So after about 2 months, buy some new stuff. So this is still really warm and I'm a little too nervous to put yeast to it. So let's start with our dry ingredients. We're going to start with about a medium-sized bowl, and the size of the bowl actually does make a difference. And the reason for that is because if it's too small, the dough is going to rise over it and fall over the edges. And if it's too big, it's not actually going to rise up. Alright, so to this we are going to add about 3 cups of all-purpose flour. So when I'm baking cakes and other types of things, I tend to be extremely precise about my measurements, not so with bread. And the reason for that, as you'll see, is you're actually going to get your hands all up in there and you'll be able to sense from the way it feels whether you need to add a little bit more flour, add a little bit more liquid to get the texture you're going for. So that's alright. To this I'm going to add the instant yeast. This is 2 1/4 teaspoons, the same as a packet of active dry. So while we're waiting for that butter milk mixture to cool down so it doesn't murder my yeast, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about myself. As my name suggests, I focus on plant-based recipes, and a lot of times I'll add like a little Korean twisty twist to it. And today, with respect to these churros, you'll literally see a Korean twist to it. Alright, so I moved that liquid from the actual little sauce pot to make it cool faster, and it's sufficiently cool now. I'm going to add it to the flour and yeast. We're also going to add a little bit of aquafaba. This is 3 tablespoons that I'm whipping up with just a fork. And aquafaba, for those of you who are new to vegan cuisine, is chickpea brine, the juice you get out of a can of chickpeas. And now we're just going to take a wooden spoon and start stirring this all together until a dough forms. And at some point the dough is going to start forming like this, and you're going to want to take the stuff off the spoon and get in there with your hands. You know, some people like to use a stand mixer or some other utensil. I like to use my hands because that way you can really feel what the dough is. And I can already feel that this dough is effing perfect. And what does it feel like? Well, it's dry on the outside, but if you give it a little push, you can tell it's pretty sticky and moist in the inside. Now, I actually had just a little bit of water on the side in case it wasn't getting what I needed, but I didn't need it this time. So now we're just going to cover this. I'm using the lid to a pot. You can use a plastic bag, a towel, whatever you want to cover this. We're going to put it somewhere sort of warm. I like to put it inside of my microwave, especially when no one's around and no one will use it. I know my boyfriend's father, he used to put it underneath the comforter in his bed. Yeah, I know. You could also just leave it on the kitchen counter if your place is not too cold. I like to keep it cold, so I'm going to stick it in that microwave. So again, we're going to put this away, and we're going to do that for 1 hour, and afterwards it's going to look like this. Yes, the yeast is definitely alive. So it's going to double in size. Call me nerdy, but this stuff, when it doubles in size, makes me so happy and excited. So I didn't have time to make 2 doughs. This is one, and it's already risen for not just 1 hour. This is after its second rising, so 2 hours it's been sitting like this. Now, just to avoid confusion, after just 1 hour, it's going to double in size. And then what you're going to do is you're going to add just a little bit of flour. And then you're just going to stick your fist in there like this. And you see all that gas just deflating. And you're just going to start kneading it like this. I actually took it out of the bowl and kneaded it on the surface, which is fine, and you're going to end up with this absolutely beautiful dough. Then you're going to stick it back in its home, that bowl that it started out in, and you're going to cover it for another hour and let it double. Now in its second rise, once it's doubled again, you're going to do exactly what we just did, punch the dough. So after you've taken it out the second time and you've kneaded it, this is what you're going to get, this beautiful dough. You're going to take it out. I'm going to cut it into quarters now. Just using a pastry knife. You can also just use a sharp knife. So I have 4 big chunks. I'm going to take 3 of them, put them back in the bowl, and cover it with saran wrap. So just a side story, I've actually never seen actual saran wrap. I always use like Reynolds or some other brand. My boyfriend actually came home with this, and it's just so adorable because he's like a total noob. He doesn't even know how to go grocery shopping. And so when I ask him to get something, if it's saran wrap, he will get effing saran wrap. Alright, so as you can see, 3 pieces in the bowl with saran wrap. Why do we do that? If it touches air, it gets hard. You don't want it. Okay, now we're going to cut this last quarter into 8ths. In other words, just divide it in half with that same pastry knife. Put this one aside. And we're just going to take this piece in our hand and just knead it a little bit like this. And now we're just going to start rolling in the middle. So like this. And I've laid it down on the cutting board, and we're just going to start rolling it out. So again, we're going to start from the center and move out. Start from the center and move out. Alright, so when your dough starts looking about 10 to 12 inches, you're actually going to start twisting like this. So what you're trying to do is create some tension in this rope. So again, you're going to twist up with your right, twist down with your left, and then you're going to bring it together. And look what we have. A beautiful braid, just all by itself. I know, so cool. And then we're going to just pinch the end here to make sure that it doesn't fall apart when we go ahead and fry these babies. So I'm going to put it on this non-stick baking sheet type thing over here, and I'm going to cover it in saran. So let's try that again. We're going to take that one piece of dough, we're going to just knead it in our hands like this, and then we're going to start rolling it in our hands, center out, right? Then we're going to place it on our cutting board or whatever, your surface. Start rolling from the middle out. So from the middle out. And then you're going to start twisting, so up on the right, down on the left to create that tension. Like that. And then we're going to bring the two ends together. And there we have it. Beautiful braid. We're going to pinch the ends right here and then put it aside. So I know that technique can seem a little bit daunting. I actually have a technique video on my YouTube channel if you guys want to check. This is a 5-minute video that just takes you through the twisting dough step, not the rest of the recipe. You can find the link to my YouTube channel on my website, thekoreanvegan.com, and you can also find it at... So I've got 2 down and 6 more to go. I'm going to get to work on that and then see you guys when they're ready to fry. So here they are, all 8 of them, and as you can see, no one's trying to win a freaking beauty contest. No one's grading you on this. So these have been chilling for about, 5 to 7 minutes, and in that process they are rising again. So what you want to do is flip them over. And the reason for that is you don't want them to get completely flat on one side. You want them to rise on both sides. Equal opportunity rising. So I've covered them again with saran wrap. I'm going to let them rise again on the other side for about 5 minutes. And in the meantime, I am heating up some oil. So while we're waiting for the oil to get hot, we're going to take about a quart-sized Ziploc bag. And we're going to add to that 4 tablespoons of sugar. And then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of cinnamon to that bag, and we're going to zip it up and use it later. Alright, so I got one of these meat thermometers. What you want to do if you can is check the actual temperature of the oil. And what you're aiming for is actually about 300 degrees. So this is a little too hot. I'm going to lower the heat on this. And why do I want a temperature on this? Because you don't want to overcook them. You don't want them to burn on the outside and stay raw on the... If you don't have a thermometer, you can always throw a teensy bit of dough in there, and if it immediately rises to the top, you know you're good to go. Alright, so the temperature has cooled off a bit. Now I'm going to just add the donuts very carefully. So I'm just frying these up in regular vegetable oil. You can use canola oil or some other kind of fragrance-free oil. So while those are cooking, I just want to let you know what my setup is. I've got a baking sheet lined with foil and a cooling rack on top. So what you're going to want to do periodically is flip them so they get even color throughout. And when both sides are this gorgeous tawny golden color, you can take them out and put them on your rack. So I'm just going to fry these up now, and once they are cool, we will talk about sugar. Alright, so remember that amazing bag full of cinnamon and 4 tablespoons of sugar? This is what we're going to do. We're going to take the donuts that have now cooled and that were sitting on that cooling rack, stick them in the bag. We're going to zip it closed, and then we're just going to shake the crap out of it. And this is what you get. Yep. And that's why I call them the Korean churros. And as everyone knows, the donut that comes right out of the fryer is the most delicious donut of them all. Oh yeah, there is no exception to that rule. So help yourself. So you can give your dad a cup of coffee or a cup of Korean churros, dairy-free. So I hope you guys enjoyed my Snapchat takeover, and I hope you guys will be eating lots of donuts in the near future. Again, I go by @thekoreanvegan on Snapchat and just about everywhere else on the interwebs, so you can find me very quickly there. And I want to thank the Feedfeed community, the Feedfeed, and everyone else for watching this and being so supportive, because I gotta tell you, I'm always so nervous. And one last thing, if you guys are interested in taking over the Feedfeed Snapchat, just message them on Snapchat. They're super cool and really fun to work with. Alright, thanks!